The first time my nephew warned me, he did it from a bathroom. I only knew that because his voice sounded wrong, too close, too careful, like he was trying not to let the room hear him. "Aunt Claire," he whispered, "please don't send Dad the money this year." I stopped in the middle of my kitchen with my laptop bag still hanging from one shoulder. It was just after 7, rain tapping softly against the window, my dinner unopened on the counter. I had been about to wire $50,000 before bed, the same way I had every year for the last 5 years. Same account, same quiet ritual, same sentence in my head. This is for Anna. This is for Leo. This is what I promised. "Leo," I said, lowering my voice, "where are you?" "In the upstairs bathroom." A pause, then even softer. "He thinks I'm taking a shower." My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. My sister Anna had been dead for 5 years. Ovarian cancer. Fast at the end, brutal in the middle, unfair from the beginning. She left behind a husband named Daniel and a son who was 11 when she died and 16 now. I helped Daniel because the story made sense. At first it had been hospital debt, then school tuition, then stability, then the house, then long-term planning for Leo. Every year there was a reason, and every year the reason arrived wrapped in the same careful dignity that made questioning it feel ugly. So I sent it, $50,000, once a year, never discussed with the wider family, never advertised, just transferred, then folded away inside grief and duty. And now Leo was hiding in a bathroom, asking me not to do it. "Tell me exactly what's wrong," I said. He breathed in through his nose. He said if the money comes tomorrow, he can finally fix everything. "That doesn't tell me anything." "I know." His voice shook once, then steadied. "I just didn't know how to start." Rain tapped harder against the glass. "I'm 32, and I work in compliance for a mid-sized financial firm. You learn quickly that people almost never lie in one clean block. They stall, they soften, they circle. The important thing is not to fill the silence for them. So I waited. Finally, Leo said, "My school almost kicked me out last month." My hand slipped off the bag strap. "What?" "He told you tuition was paid, right?" The room went very still. Daniel had sent me a receipt 3 months earlier. Private academy, senior year fees, housing supplement, activity charges. He even apologized for the number and said Anna would be furious with him for leaning on me again. I remember staring at the email before authorizing the transfer because the total had made me feel guilty, not suspicious. "Leo," I said carefully, "what do you mean, almost?" "I mean they said I couldn't come back unless the balance was cleared." He swallowed. "I'm there now, but only because Grandma Porter stepped in with something temporary. Dad told me not to mention it to you." "Why would he tell you that?" I asked. "I don't know." A beat. "No, that's not true." "I think I do." "Then say it." I heard a floorboard creak faintly through the phone. Leo's voice dropped lower. "Because he says things are always harder when you start asking for proof." There it was. Not a full confession, not yet, but enough to change the shape of the room around me. Proof. That was not a word 16-year-olds use by accident in family money conversations. That was a house word, a repeated word, a word learned from watching someone defend a system. I set my bag down silently on the floor. What else has he told you not to mention? Another pause, this one longer. Then Leo said, "There's a drawer in his office that he keeps locked now. He put your name on one of the folders." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Daniel did not have a locked office 5 years ago. He had a desk in the den and unpaid medical bills stacked inside a kitchen cabinet. If he had a locked drawer now and a folder with my name on it, then whatever I had been funding was no longer grief management. It was structure, and structure could be proven. I did not wire the money that night. That alone should have felt like action, but it didn't. It felt like a pause inside something already moving without me. I set my laptop on the kitchen table, opened Daniel's last email again, and forced myself to read it the way I would have read a stranger's message at work instead of a widower's note in a family chain I had stopped questioning years ago. The tone was familiar, careful, grateful, slightly ashamed. He said Leo's tuition balance had risen again, that he hated having to lean on me, and that he kept telling himself this would be the last difficult year before everything stabilized. Attached were 2 PDFs, one labeled tuition summary, the other housing adjustment. 3 months ago I had opened them, skimmed them, felt sick about the number, and sent the transfer. Tonight I opened them like evidence. The school logo looked right at first glance. So did the formatting. But something in the tuition statement felt off. Too clean. Too stripped down. Schools over-explain charges. They name departments, term windows, payment options, student IDs. This document gave totals and labels, but almost no institutional clutter. I enlarged the PDF and read every line. No student ID, no billing office extension, no semester reference, no footer except a website address I had never checked because I had never needed to. I checked it now. The address opened to the school homepage. That meant nothing by itself. Links can be copied from anywhere. I clicked through to the parent billing portal and found the contact number for accounts. Then I looked at the time, 7:26 p.m. Too late to call, too early to sleep. I started a clean note in my phone. Known. Daniel says tuition needed urgent payment. Leo says school almost removed him. Grandma Porter stepped in temporarily. Daniel told Leo not to mention it. Locked office drawer. Folder with my name. Need. Actual tuition status. Source of prior receipts. Timing of yearly transfers. Reason. Locked drawer exists. What fix everything means. Fix everything. Men like Daniel never say exactly what they mean when money is involved. They say stabilize, manage, handle, bridge, cover. Words that sound temporary and mature. Words that hide appetite behind burden. I typed a message to Leo. Do not tell your father you called me. Do not mention the money again tonight. If he asks, act normal. He replied almost at once. I already deleted the call. That made me close my eyes for a second. Not because it was clever, because it meant this was not the first time he had needed to think defensively inside his own house. I set the phone down and went back through the last 5 years of transfers. There had been 5 of them exactly, all in late autumn, all the same amount, all to the same account Daniel had originally told me was tied to a trust structure for Leo's future. At the time, I had asked almost no questions. Anna was dead. Leo was 11. Daniel cried only once in my kitchen, with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug he never drank from. He said Anna had made him promise never to let Leo feel instability after she was gone. That sentence had made the money feel moral. I opened the first wire confirmation and started checking details I should have checked years ago. Account holder name, routing trail, receiving bank, internal note field. The destination account was not named after a trust, an education fund, or Leo. It was just Daniel Porter. I sat back slowly. Maybe he had always told me that plainly, and I had built nobler language around it myself. Maybe not. Either way, the result was the same. I had been sending $50,000 a year directly to a grieving man and trusting him to turn it into structure. I went back to the table and opened Anna's old message archive. If Daniel had built a story around her wishes, then somewhere in the years before she died, there had to be a shape to what she actually wanted. Because if Leo was telling the truth, then tomorrow morning was no longer about one delayed transfer. It was about finding out what exactly I had been funding for 5 years. I stayed up past midnight going through old emails, voice notes, and text threads from Anna's last months that I had avoided for years. Grief had turned them into sealed glass in my head. Tonight I read them differently. Not as her younger sister, as someone trying to locate the first place a true sentence had been bent into a useful lie. Anna never once told me to send Daniel $50,000 every year. What she talked about over and over was Leo. Leo staying in one school. Leo not being dragged through adult instability. Leo having structure after she was gone. She used to say safety for a child was repetition. The same room, the same school, forms signed on time. There was one voice note from 9 days before she died that I played twice. If Daniel spirals after, help him keep Leo's world steady. Don't let grief make every adult selfish. I sat there with the phone in my hand and felt the foundation shift. Help him keep Leo's world steady was not the same thing as fund Daniel's life without limits. It was not a private transfer ritual with no oversight. Somewhere between Anna's words and the first wire transfer, the meaning had narrowed and started serving one person far more than it served Leo. At 8:03 the next morning, I called the school billing office. "I'm trying to confirm whether there was a tuition issue involving Leo Porter," I said. The woman on the phone was polite at first, then careful. "Are you an authorized account contact?" "No, but I may be helping resolve a family issue." There was a pause and the sound of typing. Then she said, "I can't disclose account details without parental authorization, but I can confirm there was a hold last month. A temporary arrangement was made." That was enough. Not proof of theft, not yet, but enough to tell me Leo had not invented the crisis, and Daniel had not handled it the way he claimed. I thanked her, wrote down the time, and called Grandma Porter. She answered on the 4th ring with no greeting at all. "Claire?" That alone told me Leo was not the only person in that house carrying tension. "I need one honest answer," I said. "Did you have to step in with Leo's school last month?" Silence. Then a long exhale. "Yes." I sat down slowly. "Why?" "Because Daniel was late again." Again. Not once. Again. "How late?" "Late enough that Leo was pulled from class for a meeting he should never have had to sit through." My chest went cold. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "I assumed you knew," she said. "You were the one sending the money." The sentence landed hard because it was fair. "I was told tuition was covered." "I know what you were told." There was no softness in her voice, only fatigue. "Has he been asking you for money too?" I asked. "Yes." "How often?" "Often enough that none of it feels last minute anymore." I looked at Daniel's old emails again while she was speaking. Tuition, housing, stability, Leo's future. The last hard year before things settled. That was the story he had been selling me. But the shape underneath it was changing fast. The school had placed a hold on Leo's account. Grandma Porter had stepped in to cover it temporarily. The money I sent was going straight into an account in Daniel's name, not a trust, not a school account, not anything built around Leo. And worst of all, this no longer looked like one difficult season stretching too long. It looked repeated, practiced, familiar. "Was there ever a trust?" I asked. "Not that I ever saw," Grandma said. "And did Anna ask for anything specific before she died?" She was quiet so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "She asked us not to turn Leo into a project people used to feel virtuous." I closed my eyes. That sounded exactly like Anna. When we hung up, I opened Daniel's last 3 years of messages again and read them without sentiment helping him. By then, I could already feel the difference between the story he had been feeding me and the facts beginning to surface. This was no longer grief. It was pattern. Once I saw it that way, Daniel's messages stopped sounding sad and started sounding designed. Same season every year, same pressure window, same apology before the ask, same appeal to Anna's memory, same implication that any delay would somehow fall on Leo. At 11:12, Daniel finally texted, "Just checking in. No rush, but the school deadline is tomorrow morning. I know Anna would hate that this is still falling on you." I stared at the screen. There it was again. Not a request for help. A hand already reaching for guilt before I had even answered. He still had no idea I had spoken to Leo. No idea I had spoken to his mother. No idea the structure he relied on had already started cracking. I typed, erased, then typed again. "Still tied up at work. I'll confirm later tonight." He replied almost immediately. "Understood. Just please don't leave this until the last minute. Leo's already under enough pressure." By then I heard the sentence properly. Not concern, positioning. He was using Leo as the moral shield again, placing the boy between the transfer and any question I might ask. I screenshotted both messages. Then I opened my transfer history and lined up 5 years of wires on one screen. 5 payments, 5 autumn deadlines, 5 urgent explanations. Same destination account every time. Daniel Porter. No trust label, no custodial structure, no school routing, just Daniel. I should have noticed that sooner. But grief has a way of laundering bad systems. It turns repetition into devotion. It makes private rituals feel noble simply because they hurt. I called the school once more, this time asking for the general office instead of billing. I don't need private academic details, I said. I only need to know whether there were repeated account-related disruptions involving Leo this year. The woman who answered was careful, but less guarded than the billing office. There have been concerns, she said. Concerns, plural. Attendance? No. Conduct? No. Another pause, then lower. Administrative concerns connected to account stability. That was enough too. Daniel had spent 5 years telling me the money was about Leo's schooling, housing, and long-term stability. But by that morning, the structure beneath the story looked very different. The school had placed a hold on Leo's account. Grandma Porter had stepped in to stop immediate damage. Daniel had still come back to me with another urgent request. The money I sent had gone directly into his personal account every year, and nobody had shown me a real structure proving the funds were protected for Leo. At 12:04, Leo texted me from school. He's asking why you haven't answered yet. I typed back immediately. What exactly did he say? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then came back. He asked if I called Grandma, and he went into his office after. Office, not den, not desk, office. I looked at the time and felt the room narrow around me. Does he lock it? I typed. Yes, more now than before. That bothered me more than it should have. Money can vanish into debt, panic, vanity, or bad decisions. A locked office is different. It suggests records, version control, preparation. I opened Anna's old thread one more time and searched one word. Daniel. Dozens of messages surfaced. Medical updates, Leo's exams, grocery lists, exhaustion. Then one from 6 weeks before she died that I had forgotten completely. If he ever starts making everything sound more noble than it is, slow him down and ask to see the paper. I read it once, then again. It wasn't prophecy. It was irritation. But sitting alone at my kitchen table with 5 years of wires open in front of me, it felt like Anna catching the back of the story before Daniel could shape it one more time. Ask to see the paper. That was it. Not accuse him blindly. Not send another $50,000 because duty still knew how to wear grief. Paper. If Daniel had built this honestly, paper would protect him. If he hadn't, paper would break him. And by then, I was almost certain of one thing. Whatever he kept inside that locked office, he had already prepared it for the day I finally started asking questions. I did not call him back that afternoon. That mattered. In 5 years, I had never once interrupted the ritual. If Daniel asked, I answered. If he framed the money as urgent, I moved quickly. Delay itself was new, and new things create pressure inside systems built on obedience. At 2:17, he called. I let it ring out. A minute later, a text appeared. Need to know if I should tell the school funds are coming. I stared at it, not because I believed him, because I wanted to hear the next lie before I touched it. I wrote back, I want to see the actual account paperwork first. No answer for almost 4 minutes. Then, what paperwork? That almost made me laugh. 5 years of $50,000 transfers, all supposedly tied to Leo's future. And he still wanted to act as though there was no written structure worth naming. I sent one more message. Tuition records, school balance statements, anything tied to Leo. He called immediately. I answered but said nothing first. "Claire," he said, warm and careful, "what's going on?" There it was. Not what do you need, not what changed. What's going on? As if the problem was my tone, not the 5 years behind it. "I want to see the paperwork," I said. A pause. "You've never asked for that before." "No." "Why now?" "Because I should have asked sooner." He let out a long breath. "Claire, I know this time of year is hard. I know Anna gets louder in your head around deadlines. But if this is about trust, I don't think Leo should be caught in the middle of it." He had taken my request for records and tried to reframe it as grief instability. "Leo is already in the middle of it," I said. Silence. Then, "What did he tell you?" Too fast. I leaned back in my chair. Enough. His voice changed by a half a degree. "He's 16. He doesn't understand the numbers." "Then help me understand them." "You already do. Tuition, housing, stability. It's the same as every year." "No," I said, "it isn't." Another silence. When he spoke again, he sounded tired. "I can pull receipts together for you, but I'm trying to stop this from turning into another crisis for Leo. If you delay now because someone has filled your head with suspicion, you'll be proving exactly why Anna wanted less chaos around him, not more." Anna, chaos, Leo, urgency, every lever at once. "Send me the records," I said, "all of them." Then, quietly, "You're making this uglier than it needs to be." There it was. Not harder, not slower, uglier. I ended the call before he could recover the tone. At 3:08, a PDF hit my inbox, not from Daniel's usual address, from a generic Gmail account labeled DP Accounting File. The subject line read, "Current Education Summary." That was wrong immediately. Schools do not call their documents education summaries. Men building paper shields do. I opened the attachment. 3 pages. School logo, balance line, payment history, total outstanding. At first glance, it looked cleaner than the earlier receipt. Too clean. More detail, more line items, more institutional tone. Which meant either he had finally sent a real document, or he had realized the earlier version was too thin and corrected the performance. I read every line slowly. No direct billing contact. No student ID. No parent portal reference. No statement date range except one floating month marker. Rounded numbers. Neat spacing. My phone buzzed. Leo. He just printed something and locked the drawer again. I read the text twice. So whatever Daniel had just emailed me, it had likely come out of that office, not a school portal. I texted back, "Can you get into the office?" The reply took longer this time. "No," but he left for 20 minutes earlier and forgot his keys on the kitchen counter. "I know where the spare is." I stopped moving. The spare. That was the first real opening the house had given me. If there was a locked drawer with my name on it, and Daniel had just printed something before sending me a cleaner version of the same story, Then I was done arguing with his language. The next answer was in that office. I didn't tell Leo to open anything that afternoon. That line matters. I told him to do nothing reckless, touch nothing if Daniel was still home, and never let himself get caught inside a room he couldn't explain. What I asked for instead was smaller and in some ways more dangerous. I asked him to watch. At 3:41, he texted me from upstairs. He left again, said he has to pick something up before dinner. 3 minutes later, drawer still locked, office door closed. Then, spare key is gone now. I stared at the screen and felt the shape of the day tighten. Daniel had printed a document, emailed me a cleaner version from a generic account, then removed the spare key before leaving the house. That was not panic. Panic is messy. This was maintenance, a system checking itself after pressure appeared. I called Leo. He answered on the second ring but said nothing. "Are you alone?" I asked. "Yes." "Where?" "My room." "Good. Listen carefully. Do not go into the office. Do not touch the drawer. I need you to tell me exactly what changed." He took a breath. He moved the gray file box. "What gray file box?" "It used to be on the bottom shelf in the office closet. Today it was on the desk. Now it's gone." "A box, not just a drawer." "What else?" "He printed something. Then he used the shredder." That made me stand up so fast my chair hit the cabinet behind me. "How much?" "I don't know. Not a lot, but enough that I heard it." I went to my kitchen window and looked out at nothing. "Did you see my name?" "Yes, on a folder. Not the box, a folder." "Where?" "In the drawer before he locked it." That was enough to make the room tilt under me. 5 years of money, a locked office, a folder with my name on it, printed documents, a missing spare key, shredded paper. None of it proved one clean crime yet, but it proved something just as important. Daniel was not merely living inside a lie. He was servicing one. "Leo," I said, keeping my voice even, "has he ever told you not to go in there?" "Yes." "How often?" "Since last year, more. Since this spring, all the time." This spring. Not random then. Recent escalation. "Did anything else change this spring?" He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "He started talking about moving." "Moving where?" "I don't know. He just kept saying things would finally get easier once the property stuff was done." Property stuff. That was the first time Leo had used that phrase. What property stuff? "He'd stop when I came in." Of course he would. I wrote it down anyway. Spring escalation, locked office, gray file box moved, shredder used, my name on folder, talk of moving after property stuff. When I ended the call, I pulled up the county property search for Daniel's address. I had never checked it before because I had never once thought of his house as anything but the place Anna died in and Leo stayed in after. That was my mistake. Sentiment makes bad blindfolds. The property was still in both names, Anna Porter, Daniel Porter. No recent transfer completed. But below the ownership summary sat something else. 1 records request. 2 document views, both within the last 60 days. I leaned closer to the screen. The viewed records were not mortgage pages or tax summaries. They were parcel history and transfer forms. I sat back slowly. That did not mean Daniel had filed anything, but it did mean he was not only thinking about school balances and household pressure. He was reading the path to formal movement, learning the language, looking at forms. The same spring Leo said, everything changed. At 4:26, another email arrived from the same Gmail account. Let me know what exactly you want, and I'll send everything. I'm trying to be patient, but this is becoming disruptive for Leo. Patient. Disruptive. Even now, he was framing himself as the adult carrying my instability. I didn't answer, because by then I understood something clearly enough to trust it. The locked drawer was not where the story began. It was where Daniel kept the version of it he was ready to survive. That thought stayed with me through the rest of the afternoon. Not because it solved anything, because it told me where not to get distracted. The money mattered. The school hold mattered. The repeated requests mattered. But the locked drawer and the missing gray file box told me something worse than ordinary misuse. They told me Daniel had already decided that if the story around the money ever started cracking, he would not explain it honestly. He would manage it. At 5:11, I called my bank and asked for more detail on the last 5 transfers. Not balances, routing trail, receiving institution, and account classification if visible. The woman on the phone put me on hold twice, then told me some of it would take until the next morning. But she could already confirm one thing. All 5 wires went to the same individual checking account, she said. Not a custodial account? No. Not a trust? No. Just a personal checking account under Daniel Porter. Yes. I thanked her and ended the call. That should not have shocked me anymore. But there is a difference between suspecting your money went somewhere personal and hearing a neutral stranger confirm that 5 years of grief and obligation had been routed into one man's checking account. No trust, no school account, no protected structure, just Daniel. At 5:26, Leo texted again. He's home. Then, a minute later, he brought home a banker's box. I stared at the message. Not a folder, not one extra paper, a banker's box. What's on it? I typed back. Nothing, no writing. Where did he take it? Office. That was the moment the day crossed from suspicion into something more disciplined. People do not bring home unlabeled banker's boxes and lock them in a private office because they are late on school bills. They do that because documents are moving, because categories are being consolidated, because they know the next conversation will require a version of events that can survive contact. I called Leo again. This time he sounded frightened now. He saw me in the hallway, he whispered. Did he say anything? He asked why I kept lingering near the office. What did you tell him? That I was looking for my headphones. Did he believe you? I don't know. I sat down with my notebook open. Tonight you do nothing. You don't ask about the office, you don't mention the box, and you don't tell him we talked. If he says anything about money or school, listen. He was quiet for a beat. Then, are you coming over? That question sat between us longer than it should have, because I wanted to say yes. I wanted to drive there immediately and force the whole thing into daylight before he could move one more piece. But men like Daniel live off emotional timing. They count on the other person arriving half-briefed and fully angry. "Not tonight," I said. Leo exhaled, disappointed but not surprised. "I need one more thing from you," I said. "Has he ever shown you papers and told you they proved something?" "He did once." "When?" "After Grandma got into a fight with him in the kitchen, maybe 3 months ago." "What papers?" "I don't know. He said if anyone questioned him, he had records. He said people always get suspicious when they don't understand how expensive life is." Records. Another house word. "What kind of records?" "He said school stuff, house stuff, and some things your sister left." A cold line moved through my chest. "What things from my sister?" "I don't know. He just said Mom knew how hard things would be and left things for him to handle." I wrote it down, not because I believed it, because that was exactly the kind of sentence a liar builds early and keeps on hand for years. It sounds intimate enough that no one asks for its shape. If Daniel had started invoking Anna's authority inside the house, then the office was not just holding financial cover. It might be holding her version. And if he had been building that version carefully enough to fund himself for 5 years, then the banker's box he brought home tonight was not backup. It was defense. I slept badly and woke early, not because I expected clarity by morning, because I knew Daniel would move fast if he thought the rhythm had broken. Men who live inside managed stories can survive almost any amount of quiet trust. What they cannot tolerate is interruption. At 6:42, he texted again. "Morning. Need to confirm whether I should tell the school the transfer is landing today." Still school, still urgency, still Leo placed between me and the question. I did not answer. Instead, I called Martin Keene. He had handled my sister's estate paperwork after she died and had been my father's attorney before that. Not warm, not theatrical. Exactly the kind of man who made liars feel less graceful than they sounded in their own heads. He answered on the second ring. "Claire?" "I need 10 minutes," I said, "and I need you to listen all the way through before you tell me I'm overreacting." "That usually means you already know you're not." "Good." I walked him through it cleanly. 5 annual transfers of $50,000, Daniel's personal account, Leo's warning, the school hold, Grandma Porter covering it temporarily, the locked office, the folder with my name, the missing spare key, the gray file box, the banker's box Daniel brought home last night, the repeated language about records, the suggestion that Anna had left things for him to handle. Martin was silent the entire time. When I finished, he asked only one question. "Did Anna ever create a written support structure for Leo that you were shown directly?" "No." "Did Daniel ever produce trust documents?" "No." "Then stop treating this like a family misunderstanding." The sentence landed hard. "Treat it like what?" I asked. "A controlled money narrative built around grief until proven otherwise." I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. That was exactly what it felt like. But hearing it said aloud changed the scale of it. This was no longer just Daniel maybe lying about tuition. It was Daniel building a moral system around my dead sister's wishes, then using that system to route money through himself for 5 years. "What do I do first?" I asked. "Freeze movement," Martin said. "No transfer, no warning, no confrontation until you know where the paper actually sits. Second, Document everything. Screenshots, dates, exact statements. Third, get eyes on the office if you can do it without putting Leo at risk. At risk? That mattered more than anything else. Could Daniel have filed something? I asked. Maybe not formally, but men who prepare folders with your name on them rarely stop at one kind of paper. I wrote that down too. At 7:18, Daniel called. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Morning," he said, voice already carrying that tired patience I had once mistaken for sincerity. "I need to know whether I should tell billing we're covered." Covered. As if he and I were still jointly managing Leo's future, instead of standing on opposite sides of a door I hadn't opened yet. "I need to see the records first," I said. A pause. "What records?" "The actual school account history, the trust documents if there are any, whatever is in the folder with my name on it." Silence. Then, carefully, "Leo talked to you." That was not a question. "Yes." He exhaled through his nose. "Claire, he's upset and confused. He hears fragments and turns them into stories. If you let a 16-year-old reshape a private arrangement that has worked for 5 years, it hasn't worked for Leo." Another silence, shorter this time. "You don't understand the full picture." "Then show it to me." His voice cooled. "You're making this uglier than it has to be." There it was again. Ugly. Not wrong, not inaccurate. Ugly. "Tonight," I said, "I want to see everything." He did not answer for almost 4 seconds. Then, "Fine. Come by after dinner." I ended the call and sat still for a long moment. If Daniel had agreed that easily, then one of 2 things was true. Either he thought the office would survive scrutiny, or he had already spent the night deciding what needed to disappear before I arrived. That was the problem with agreeing too easily. Men like Daniel resist when resistance helps them. They become cooperative when cooperation gives them better control over the frame. I spent the next few hours building sequence. First, I pulled every transfer confirmation from the last 5 years into one folder and exported the email chains that came with them. Then, I screenshotted Daniel's texts from the previous night and that morning. After that, I typed out a timeline from memory, keeping it simple. Year 1, hospital debt, school continuity, first transfer. Year 2, housing and stability. Year 3, tuition pressure. Year 4, long-term support for Leo's future. Year 5, urgent school deadline, school hold. Grandma Porter intervenes. When you strip a lie down to its yearly invoices, it starts looking less like tragedy and more like maintenance. At 11:06, Leo texted me from school. He's been in the office twice today. "How long?" I asked. "First time, maybe 10 minutes. Second time, longer." "Did he take anything out?" "Not that I saw, but he locked the drawer again." Again. Not random bills. A protected section inside an already protected room. Whatever Daniel feared was not general embarrassment. It was specific paper. I wrote back, "Do not look. Do not ask. Just tell me if anyone else comes to the house." He answered with a single thumbs up. At noon, Martin called back. "I checked the public side," he said. "No completed trust filings tied to Leo. No visible educational structure in your name. No recent probate amendment that would justify Daniel speaking as if this were formalized." That didn't clear anything up. It made it worse. Could he have private paperwork? I asked. Of course, the question is whether it's real, partial, or constructed for persuasion. Constructed for persuasion. That phrase fit Daniel too well. What about Anna's estate file? I asked. Martin was quiet for a beat. There were no special post-death support instruments in the documents I handled. Nothing that would create an annual $50,000 expectation. I stopped writing. So if he says Anna wanted this, then he is relying on narrative, not estate structure. Daniel had turned grief into a private billing system and wrapped it in Anna's memory until asking for proof felt cruel. At 1:48, Grandma Porter called me. I need to tell you something before tonight, she said. He cleaned the office yesterday before Leo called you. I went still. How do you know? Because he asked me where the shred bags were. How many? I only saw one, maybe two. I don't know what was in them. Did he say why? He said he was getting old paperwork out of the way before you started making things complicated. There it was again. Me, recast as the complication, rather than the person funding the whole structure. Did he mention my name? Yes. How? He said you always get colder when money turns into paper. Because he wasn't wrong. I do. And he knew it. Which meant tonight's invitation was not a surrender. It was an attempt to control the version of the paper I saw before I had a chance to compare it to the version he had already moved. What else? I asked. He called someone after that. Not me, not family. Did you hear anything? Only one sentence. She lowered her voice. If she asks, I'll show her the education file first. Education file. First. That word mattered. It meant there was an order to what he planned to show me, a guided path, a curated stack, which meant there were other things he did not want to become the first thing I saw. At 5:03, Daniel texted me the address for dinner, as if I hadn't been there 100 times before. Come by at 7. Leo will be upstairs so we can talk clearly. That text changed the entire evening. It was staging. He didn't want Leo present. He wanted the room cleaner and quieter. Just him, the office, the chosen files, and me. I sent the message to Martin. His reply came less than a minute later. Do not go alone. I called Martin immediately. I wasn't planning to, I said. That's good, he replied, because if Daniel has spent the day cleaning, shredding, and curating, then tonight is not a conversation. It's a presentation. I stood at my kitchen counter with one hand flat against the wood, looking at the rain-dark window over the sink. What do you think he's trying to protect? Maybe the money trail, maybe the structure around it, maybe something he attached to Anna after she died, to make his version harder to challenge. A pause. The phrase education file bothers me. Why? Because it sounds like a category meant to contain questions before they spread. That was exactly what it sounded like. A neat stack, a moral stack, a stack designed to say Leo, tuition, future, sacrifice. A stack built to make every other question feel cruel or unnecessary. I need to see the office, I said. Yes, Martin said, but not on his terms. By 6 o'clock we had a plan. Simple, controlled. No bluffing, no threats, no emotional speech on the porch. Martin would come with me and wait until Daniel opened the door before introducing himself. That mattered. If Daniel knew in advance I wasn't arriving alone, he could reframe the evening, cancel it, or move the room somewhere else. Better to let him prepare the lie he expected to tell, and then force it to survive a witness. At 6:14, Leo texted. He cleaned the desk. The drawer is still locked. He put a dark folder on top of the cabinet. Dark folder. Not the one with my name, unless he wanted me to see it. And if he wanted me to see it, that meant it had already been stripped into usefulness. I typed back, "Do nothing. Stay normal. Stay upstairs when I arrive." He answered almost instantly, "Okay." Then, 30 seconds later, he keeps checking the office clock. That detail bothered me more than the locked drawer did. Clock checking is timing behavior, not grief, not stress. Timing. Daniel was measuring the evening against some sequence already built in his head. At 6:42, Martin pulled up outside my building in his dark sedan. He wore the same overcoat he always wore in bad weather and carried a leather folder thick enough to make anyone lying for a living uncomfortable on sight. I got into the passenger seat, and we drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then he said, "Before we go in, I want your exact objective. See the office. See what he chooses to show first. Confirm whether the story is educational support or something wider." Good. Not confrontation? No. Not accusation? Not until I know what he thinks he can survive. That earned the smallest nod from him. The drive to Daniel's house took 26 minutes, long enough for me to replay the previous 5 years in a way I had never allowed myself to before. Every transfer, every carefully worded email, every apology timed to make refusal feel ugly, every sentence ending with Leo. It all looked different now. Less like support, more like maintenance of a private system that depended on my sentiment staying one step ahead of my scrutiny. Daniel's house sat at the end of a curved suburban street lined with wet hedges and expensive porch lights. Anna had loved that street when they moved there. She said it looked like the kind of place where bad things were too embarrassed to happen in public. That thought almost made me smile. The porch light was already on when we arrived. "He's expecting compliance," Martin said quietly as he parked. "Do not give him performance. Make him explain." I nodded once. We walked to the door together. I rang the bell. 3 seconds later, Daniel opened it. His face changed when he saw Martin, but only for a moment. That moment was enough. Not surprise that another person existed. Surprise that another adult had arrived with me before he got to control the room. "Claire," he said, forcing warmth into his voice. Then to Martin, "I wasn't expecting company." "I assumed that," Martin said. Daniel's expression tightened so slightly, most people would have missed it. "Leo's upstairs," he said. "I thought this would be easier if we kept things calm." "Then let's keep them calm," I said. He stepped aside. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and reheated food. Too clean, too arranged. Like the whole first floor had been reset in the hour before we arrived. The den light was on. The office door at the end of the hall stood closed. Not open. Closed. Deliberately. Daniel led us into the dining room instead of toward the office. 3 place settings. Water glasses already poured. One dark folder resting at the head of the table. There it was. The presentation. "I pulled together the key documents," he said, "so we don't have to turn this into something bigger than it is." Martin didn't sit. Neither did I. Daniel noticed. The warmth in his face thinned. "This," he said, placing one hand on the dark folder, is the education file. Tuition history, housing support, Leo's activity costs, therapy, all of it. I know you've been upset today, Claire, and I understand why. But if we walk through the numbers carefully, I think you'll see that what feels suspicious is really just complicated. Complicated. Another one of his words. Not false, not hidden. Complicated. The language men use when they need confusion to keep carrying weight after facts begin slipping. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. Open it, I said. Daniel did. Inside were neatly printed spreadsheets, invoice copies, school statements, and a summary page at the top with yearly categories broken into clean columns. Tuition, housing, counseling, transportation, stabilization reserve. Stabilization reserve. I nearly laughed. Not because it was ridiculous, because it was too elegant, too polished, too ready. Martin leaned forward slightly. Who prepared these summaries? Daniel hesitated. That was the first real crack of the night. Then he said, I did, to make it easier to understand. Of course he did. The whole evening had been built on that promise. Easier to understand, cleaner, calmer, contained. I looked at the summary page again, then at the closed office door behind him, and knew with complete certainty that the dark folder on the table was not the truth. It was only the version he wanted to survive first. I didn't sit down. Neither did Martin. That changed the room more than Daniel expected. He had built the scene around compliance. 3 place settings, water poured, papers stacked neatly under warm light, a family financial conversation disguised as hospitality. Sitting would have accepted the frame. Standing kept it unstable. Daniel noticed immediately. You don't need to look at me like that, he said. I'm trying to make this easier. No, I said. You're trying to make it cleaner. His mouth tightened. Martin reached for the summary page first, not the underlying documents. That was exactly what I would have done. When someone curates a story, the summary tells you what they are most eager to have believed before anyone starts touching detail. Tuition, housing, counseling, transportation, stabilization reserve. That last phrase still sat on the page like a lie trying to sound managerial. Martin looked up. What is a stabilization reserve? Daniel answered too fast. Emergency support buffer for interruptions, unexpected bills, gaps in timing. In whose account? Martin asked. A pause. Mine, Daniel said, but earmarked for Leo. There it was. Not a trust, not segregated, not protected. Earmarked. A private intention disguised as structure. Martin slid the page aside and picked up the first school statement. Who prepared these packet copies? I told you, I assembled them. No, Martin said. I asked who prepared them. Daniel folded his arms. Some are originals. Some I reformatted so Claire wouldn't have to sort through clutter. Reformatted. That word landed heavily. Not collected, not forwarded, reformatted, which meant edited, retyped, reassembled, filtered through him before they reached me. Exactly what he had been doing to the story all along. I stepped closer to the table. Why did Leo almost get pulled from school last month? Daniel looked at me without blinking. He told you that? Yes. He exhaled through his nose. Because timing slipped for a week, and school offices love creating pressure. Grandma Porter covered it. Another pause. Temporarily. You told me tuition was already handled. It was being handled. No. That was the thing men like Daniel count on. The little shift between was and was being. Between covered and being managed. Between truth and its dampened cousin. Martin lifted another page. Where is the actual school billing portal record? Daniel frowned. You're looking at the record. No, Martin said. I'm looking at a packet you assembled. For the first time, Daniel stopped pretending not to understand the distinction. What exactly do you think I've done? I answered before Martin could. I think you built a version. Daniel laughed once, short and humorless. A version of what? Of Anna, of Leo, of what this money was for, of what I was supposed to feel every year before I sent it. That landed harder than the financial questions had, because he could still try to argue expense, delay, confusion, cash flow. Arguing with motive was harder. I kept things afloat, he said. With my money, I said. With help, he corrected. Not with gratitude, not with humility, with help, as if I had merely joined an operation that belonged morally to him. Martin set the school page down. Mr. Porter, where are the original education records? Daniel did not answer. Where are the unedited records? Still nothing. Martin glanced toward the closed office door. That was enough. The room changed all over again, because Daniel saw him glance, and Daniel knew we knew. The packet on the table was not the full stack. The office was. You don't get to walk into my house and start treating me like a criminal because Claire got emotional over a few school delays, he said. I almost smiled. There it was at last. Emotional. Again. The oldest move in the room. Open the office, I said. No. The answer came clean and fast. Too fast. Martin did not even look surprised. Then explain why. Because it's private. What in there is private from the woman who sent you $250,000? He said nothing. From upstairs came a floorboard creak. Leo. Daniel heard it too and turned his head by reflex. That was the first thing. The second was smaller, but worse. On the edge of the dark folder, half hidden under the summary sheets, I saw a tab label in black marker. Aunt Claire. Not Claire, not transfers, not education. Aunt Claire. A named section, a category, a file built around me. I reached for it. Daniel moved first. Not enough to stop me, but enough to expose exactly what he was guarding. And in that movement, more than in any spreadsheet or summary he had set on the table, he finally confirmed what the whole day had been building toward. The education file was only the front layer. The real story was still in the office. And now, we finally knew where the next layer was waiting. Daniel's hand stopped halfway across the table, but the damage was already done. He had moved too fast, too instinctively, too cleanly. Not to protect Leo, not to protect grief, to protect a layer. I kept my fingers on the tab marked Aunt Claire and looked at him. What is this? I asked. His jaw tightened. Personal notes. About me? about the arrangement. Arrangement. Not promise, not support. Arrangement. Martin heard it too. "Mr. Porter, step back from the table." Daniel didn't move at first. That hesitation mattered. It told me the papers in front of us still felt dangerous to him, which meant the closed office behind him felt worse. "Step back," Martin repeated. This time Daniel did. I pulled the tab free. Inside were printouts of my transfer confirmations, copies of Daniel's emails to me, handwritten notes in the margins, and a single typed sheet with 3 lines at the top. Best timing for request phrasing that works. Avoid when Claire is angry. For 1 second, the room seemed to narrow around the page, not because it surprised me, because it was uglier than I had expected. This was not just a man misusing money. This was a man studying response, tracking emotional timing, building a usable map of me the same way other people build scripts. I read the first handwritten note. Lead with Leo. Mention Anna only after hesitation. Do not send receipts too fast. My hand went cold. Daniel saw my face change and made the mistake of speaking. "You're reading that in the worst possible way." I looked up. "There are better ways to read instructions for manipulating me?" It wasn't manipulation. It was planning. Martin's expression did not move. "Planning what?" "Conversations." "No," I said quietly. "Planning outcomes." That landed. For the first time all evening, Daniel looked less controlled than irritated. Good. Irritation narrows people. It makes them stop performing maturity and start defending appetite. I kept going. The next page was worse. A yearly list. Year 1, hospital debt worked. Year 2, school continuity worked. Year 3, frame as long-term support. Year 4, push stability/housing. Year 5, use final school pressure. I stared at it. 5 years, reduced to tested language, not tragedy, not emergency, a working system. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Leo again, listening. Daniel followed the sound with his eyes for half a second and then looked back at me. "You wanted proof that I kept things running?" "That's proof." I was trying to keep control over a situation that kept changing. "With my money," I said. "With Leo's life attached to it." "No," I said. "With Leo used as cover." Silence. Martin held out his hand. I passed him the file. He read the top 2 pages, then one more, then set them down with deliberate care. "Open the office," he said. Daniel laughed once, brittle now. "So you can go digging through every private paper in my house because Claire is upset?" Martin answered before I could. "No, because you created a file called Aunt Claire that tracks emotional leverage, payment timing, and language effects. At this point, the office is no longer separate from the arrangement." Arrangement again. Daniel heard the trap too late. Every word he chose made this less human and more structured. Then a door opened upstairs. Footsteps. Leo appeared at the end of the hall in socks and a gray school sweatshirt, one hand still on the banister, his face pale but steady. Daniel turned so sharply the chair behind him knocked against the floor. "I told you to stay upstairs." Leo didn't move. "You also told me school was paid," he said. The room went still. Not because of the accusation itself, because this was the first time Daniel's two audiences, me and Leo, were standing in the same truth at once. Daniel straightened. Go back upstairs. No. That single word changed the balance of the house. Leo looked at me, not his father. The office drawer isn't the only locked thing. I felt my whole body go still. What do you mean? I asked. There's a cabinet behind the desk, he swallowed. He moved papers into it last night after you called. Daniel took one fast step toward the hall. Martin moved even faster. Stop! Daniel stopped. Good. Because the moment he tried to move first, the house stopped being a dining room with paperwork and became what it really was. A controlled scene around a locked room, a hidden cabinet, and 5 years of money routed through grief. No one moved for a second after Martin stopped him. Daniel stood halfway between the dining room and the hall, breathing harder now, all the patient warmth finally stripped out of him. Leo stayed on the stairs with one hand on the banister, pale but steady. I kept looking at Daniel and thinking the same thing. He had prepared for me, but not for the room turning against his timing. Move away from the office, Martin said. Daniel gave a short, angry laugh. This is still my house. No, I said. It's the house you used to stage 5 years of lies. By then, the problem was design. He had tracked me, studied me, built categories around me, and timed each request to whatever version of Anna and Leo would move me fastest. Open the office, Martin said. Daniel looked at Leo. Go upstairs. Leo didn't move. Open the office, Martin repeated. Daniel's jaw worked once. Then he said, You're acting like there's some secret vault in there. There is, Leo said. What vault? I asked. Not a real vault. A cabinet behind the desk. There's wood over it, but it opens. When? Martin asked. Last spring. He made me carry files once. Last spring. The same period when the office became more restricted, and Daniel started talking about moving once the property stuff was done. Daniel tried one last version of calm. He's a kid. He sees half a thing and turns it into a story. That worked better before the Aunt Claire file, I said. He said nothing. Martin held out his hand toward the office. Key. Daniel did not move. I don't have to give you anything. Martin's tone flattened. You built written leverage notes around Claire, tracked 5 years of payment timing, and assembled private summaries instead of originals. Credibility is your problem tonight. Daniel stopped acting offended and started acting cornered. Good. He looked toward the office door. That was enough for me. I moved before he could. Not toward him, toward the office. Daniel reacted instantly. Claire? Martin stepped into his path at the exact moment I reached the handle. The door was unlocked. I pushed the door inward. The room smelled like paper, toner, and lemon cleaner. Too clean. The desk had been wiped. The shelves were orderly. One gray banker's box sat under the side table. The drawer Leo had mentioned was locked, and behind the desk, half hidden by a framed print leaning against the wall, was a narrow wood panel with a small brass pull. Not decorative, not original. Added. I crossed the room and pulled the print aside. The panel matched the wall, but the cut line around it was visible once you knew to look. Behind me, Daniel said, Claire, stop. No. I took hold of the brass pull and tugged. Locked. I turned back toward him. Key. Daniel stared at me. You do not get to tear through private documents in my house because you've chosen to interpret everything in the ugliest way possible. Leo spoke from the hall, quiet but clear. It's in the blue bowl by the laundry room. Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second. That was the moment it broke. I went to the laundry room myself. The blue bowl sat on top of a narrow cabinet beside the folding counter, full of loose batteries, old keys, and one small brass key with a strip of masking tape around the top. I carried it back to the office without speaking. Daniel no longer looked misunderstood. He looked tired, angry, and exposed. I slid the key into the lock behind the desk. It turned smoothly. The panel released with a dull click and pulled outward. Inside were stacked file folders, 2 binders, 1 sealed envelope, and a thick packet clipped together at the top with a yellow note. The note was in Daniel's handwriting. "Show this first." I stared at it. Then I lifted the packet out and understood, before I read a single line, that the office had not been holding records. It had been holding order. His order. His version of Anna, Leo, the money, and me. And now it was finally out in the room with all of us. For 1 second, no one moved. The packet sat in my hands with Daniel's yellow note still clipped to the front. Show this first. Not find this first. Show this first. A prepared sequence, a guided reveal. Even inside the hidden cabinet, he had arranged the order in which I was supposed to understand my own grief. Martin stepped closer. Open it. I did. The first page was a typed letter with Anna's name at the bottom. I knew before I finished the first sentence that it was wrong, not obviously fake. That was the worst part. It used the right emotional furniture. Leo's future, stability, trust in Daniel, gratitude for my support. But the voice was off, too polished, too explanatory. Anna did not write like someone preparing her own legacy for later use. I looked at the signature. A copy, not ink, not original. Where did this come from? I asked. Daniel said nothing. Martin took the page from me and read it once, then turned it over. No source date, no original header, no chain. Good. I wasn't imagining it. It was wrong in professional ways, too. Behind the letter sat a second document, a typed household support plan, written as if Anna had pre-approved Daniel's control over major decisions until Leo reached emotional stability. Emotional stability. Another phrase nobody in my family would ever use that way. Not Anna, not my father, not even Daniel 5 years ago before he learned to dress greed in therapeutic language. I flipped to the next page. A transfer summary, year by year, amount by amount, purpose by purpose. Year 1, emergency continuity. Year 2, school security. Year 3, grief stabilization. Year 4, home protection. Year 5, academic preservation. I almost laughed, not because it was absurd, because it was elegant. This was what he had been doing the whole time, turning each year into a respectable category before anyone could ask where the money had actually gone. Martin took that page too. Where are the originals behind these summaries? Daniel looked at the hidden cabinet, not at us. That told me the packet was not evidence. It was a shield. I reached back into the cabinet and pulled out the first binder. Utility bills, mortgage notices, credit card statements, personal loan letters, past due warnings. Some dated back 3 years. Some had red stamps across the top. Final, urgent, action required. I held one up. School security? I asked quietly. Is that what this paid for? Daniel's face changed. There it was at last. Not patience, not hurt, resentment. You think bills stop because someone dies? He said. No, I answered. I think you let me believe I was funding Leo when I was funding you. That house was his life too. Then why was his school almost unpaid? He had no answer ready enough to use, so I pulled out the sealed envelope next. Inside were 2 printed emails and 1 draft sale inquiry tied to a property agent, not the house, a different parcel reference, smaller, adjacent. 1 line at the bottom was highlighted in yellow. Need clean authority trail before discussing numbers further. I handed it to Martin. He read it and went still. Then he looked at Daniel. What parcel is this? Daniel said nothing. Leo answered from the hall. The lot behind the fence? He said if that piece sold, everything would finally calm down. Everything. Not Leo's future, not grief, not the house. Everything. The room felt colder by the second, because now the shape was complete enough to name. The money had not only been covering Daniel's private debts, it had been carrying him long enough to keep another transaction alive in the background. I looked back at the packet with Anna's typed voice, the yearly moral categories, the debt letters, the sale inquiry, and the highlighted line about authority. Then I understood what the hidden cabinet really held. Not memories, not records, a conversion kit. A way to turn my sister into paperwork. A way to turn Leo into leverage. A way to turn 5 years of my money into a story respectable enough to survive 1 more transfer. No one said anything for several seconds after that. Daniel stood beside the dining room table with his hands at his sides, looking less like a grieving widower than a man who had finally run out of softer words. The packet, the fake Anna letter, the debt notices, the sale inquiry, the yearly summaries, all of it sat exposed now, no longer in a hidden cabinet, no longer in the order he had planned for me to see it. Martin set the sale inquiry beside the debt letters and looked up. You were using Claire's transfers to keep yourself solvent long enough to push a separate parcel conversation. Daniel gave a short laugh. That is not what this was. No, I asked. Then what was it? He turned toward me. Survival, he said. You think money sits in neat little boxes because you want it to. It doesn't. House bills, school bills, debt, interruptions, everything touches everything. That would have sounded reasonable yesterday. Not now. Then you should have told me the truth, I said. And what? He snapped. You would have kept sending it if I told you half of it was keeping the house from falling apart, and the other half was buying time? There it was. Not a full confession, but enough. Buying time. For debts. For school pressure. For the parcel behind the fence. For whatever authority trail he thought he still had a chance to build around me. Leo was still standing in the hall, white-faced but steady. You said the money was Mom's plan. Daniel looked at him, and for the first time all night, he didn't even try to sound gentle. Your mother had plans. Then she died. The sentence hit the room like a slammed door. because that was the truth underneath everything else. Daniel had not merely twisted Anna's wishes. He had resented them for failing to solve his life after she was gone. Martin spoke before I could. From this point on, every document in this cabinet is preserved. Claire, do not leave anything here tonight. Daniel laughed again, sharper now. You think you can walk out with my house records? Martin didn't blink. I think Claire can walk out with any document tied to funds she provided, representations made in her name, or material used to obtain further transfers from her. I looked at the packet again. The fake Anna letter was lying half on top of the yearly summaries, as if he still hoped proximity would make them support each other. Did you write this? I asked. He didn't answer. Did you write the letter in her voice? His silence lasted long enough to become an answer. Leo made a sound then. Not loud, just one small, involuntary sound of disgust that seemed to age him and expose Daniel at the same time. That was the moment the house stopped being his. Not legally, not yet, but morally. Because the one person he had been using as shield and excuse had now seen the inside of the shield. I started stacking the documents in a new order. Debt letters, transfer summaries, the fake letter, the support plan, the parcel inquiry, the highlighted authority line. Not his order, mine. Martin handed me an empty document envelope from his case. Take originals where you can, photographs where you can't, and log everything before midnight. Daniel took one step forward. Claire, if you do this, there is no coming back from it. I looked at him across the table full of paper and thought, with surprising calm, that he had misunderstood the direction of the sentence. There had been no coming back from this for a long time. Not since the first year he learned that guilt paid faster than transparency. Not since the first time he put Anna's memory between me and proof. Not since he built a file called Aunt Claire and started testing which version of grief moved money best. I slid the fake letter into the envelope first. Then I looked at Leo. This ends tonight, I said. And for the first time since he called me from the bathroom, he looked less afraid than relieved. That changed the room more than any document had. For 5 years, Daniel had been able to speak as if everything he did was in service of Leo. Every request, every apology, every rushed explanation, every noble phrase about stability and sacrifice had relied on one assumption, that Leo would remain abstract enough to use, but quiet enough not to interrupt. The moment relief showed on his face, that assumption died. Daniel saw it too. Don't look at me like that, he said to Leo. And there was something ugly in his voice now that had nothing to do with grief or financial pressure. You have no idea what it costs to keep a house running. Leo stayed where he was. Then you should have told her. No, I said before Daniel could answer. He couldn't tell me. Because if he had told me the truth, I would have changed the structure. That was the real wound. Not that I might have refused him completely, that I would have removed his control over the flow. Martin was already logging the first set of originals on his legal pad. Time, description, source location. He worked like my father used to repair engines. No wasted motion, no drama, only order where other people tried to survive on noise. Claire, he said, I want copies of every screen in that office before anything else gets touched. Leo, stay where you are. Mr. Porter, do not interfere. Daniel laughed once, thin, bitter. You keep talking like this is criminal. Martin didn't look up. No, I keep talking like this is preservable. That word landed harder than criminal would have, because criminal can still be argued against with outrage, innocence, tone. Preservable means the room has already moved past you. I went back to the office with my phone in my hand and started taking photographs. The hidden cabinet, the false letter in Anna's voice, the support plan, the yearly summaries, the debt letters, the parcel inquiry, the authority line, the Aunt Claire file, then the drawer. I used the same key Daniel had been guarding all day and opened it. Inside were 3 folders, a receipt envelope, and a slim black notebook. The top folder was labeled School, the second, House. The third had no label at all. I opened School first. Partial invoices, late notices, 2 real statements mixed with cleaner, rewritten versions, not fabricated from nothing, which would have been easier to expose. Worse than that, real fragments reassembled into a more useful story. Enough truth to survive first contact. Enough omission to keep the money moving. House was uglier. Insurance lapses, utility warnings, minimum payment notices, a second credit card I had never heard of, a loan statement with Daniel's name and a balance far too high for someone supposedly just trying to keep a widow's house stable for a child. I took photos of everything. Then I opened the unlabeled folder. For 1 second, I thought I was looking at old family paperwork. Then I recognized my own handwriting. Birthday cards. 1 signed holiday check from years ago. A thank you note I had written after Anna's funeral. 3 photocopied signatures clipped together. Signature samples again. But not in the hidden cabinet this time. Here they were paired with yearly request notes and 1 typed draft email that began, "I hate asking you this again, but if I don't solve it this week, Leo will feel it first." I stared at the page. Version after version. Tested language. Different emotional entries. All orbiting the same outcome. Daniel had not merely lied 5 times. He had workshopped me. Behind me, I heard Martin move into the office doorway. "What is it?" I held up the page without turning around. "Templates." He stepped closer, took the page, read it once. Then he said the one sentence I knew was true before he spoke it. He wasn't only responding to need. He was managing yield. Yield. There it was, the language of systems, not sorrow. I turned and looked past Martin toward the dining room, where Daniel still stood, blocked now from the house he thought he controlled by nothing more dramatic than sequence, witness, and paper. Leo was still on the stairs, still listening, still learning in one night what I had somehow failed to see for 5 years. I closed the drawer slowly. The money had not just supported Daniel. It had trained him. Trained him to believe that if he arranged grief carefully enough, it would keep paying. I walked back into the dining room with the unlabeled folder in one hand and Martin's envelope of originals in the other. Daniel looked at the paper first, then at my face, and I watched him realize the evening had narrowed again. "What now?" he asked. Not, "What did you find?" Not, "Let me explain." What now? That was the voice of a man who finally understood the room was no longer organized around his pacing. "Now," I said, "you stop talking about sacrifice." He gave a brittle laugh. You think one folder proves intent? No, Martin said. The folders prove sequence. Intent was already all over the house. Leo came down 2 more steps. Daniel noticed and turned toward him immediately, as if the last thing he could still control was who heard what first. Go upstairs, he said. Leo didn't move. No. The word landed even harder the second time. Daniel looked at me. You're enjoying this. That almost shocked me. Not because it was cruel, because it was revealing. Men who exploit pity for years almost always assume exposure is driven by cruelty, because they cannot imagine truth having enough force to move on its own. I'm ending it, I said. That isn't the same thing. He took 1 step toward the table. Martin stepped between us. Mr. Porter, if you interfere with document preservation again, you will make this worse for yourself. For myself, Daniel snapped. Claire was never supposed to carry this alone. I stepped in because somebody had to. With my money, I said. With Leo's life attached to it. No, Leo said from the stairs. With your life attached to it. Silence. That was the sentence that finally broke him. Until then, Daniel had still been trying to sound burdened. Cornered, maybe, but useful, necessary. That one sentence stripped it away, because it came from the one person he had used as excuse for 5 years. Daniel turned toward him fully. You have no idea what your mother left me with. Leo's face changed. Not fear, clarity. She left me, he said. You used that. No one moved. Then the doorbell rang. All 4 of us flinched. Daniel looked at the front hall in confusion. Martin did not. He just checked his watch. I asked Mrs. Porter to come, he said. Good. This could no longer remain a private confrontation between the man who built the lie and the people he used to stabilize it. It needed one more witness from inside the old structure. Daniel's mother entered 30 seconds later, still wearing her raincoat, water on the shoulders, handbag clutched too tightly under one arm. She took one look at the table, the open office, Leo on the stairs, and my face, and whatever hope Daniel had left drained out of him. You told her, he said. She didn't answer him. She looked at me. Did you find it all? Enough, I said. That one word changed her posture. Not relief, resignation. The posture of someone who had known for too long that truth was coming and had run out of reasons to delay it. Martin spoke plainly. Mrs. Porter, did you know Claire's money was not being used primarily for Leo's school? She closed her eyes for 1 second. Yes. Daniel actually made a sound then, half protest, half disbelief. Mother. She cut him off without turning toward him. I knew some of it wasn't. I didn't know how far it had gone. How long? I asked. A little over 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of watching him keep taking my money. 2 years of school pressure, household pressure, parcel pressure, and whatever story he fed himself every time he decided next year would be the one that made it all clean. Daniel looked around the room as if he could still locate one person who belonged to him inside it. There wasn't one. That was the collapse. Not shouting, not handcuffs, not melodrama. Just the slow, brutal moment when every witness in the house stopped carrying his version for him. Daniel understood it before he admitted it. You could see it in the way his shoulders changed. Not slumping, not surrendering, just losing the last shape he had been holding himself in all evening. Useful widower, burdened father, practical man carrying impossible weight. All of it had depended on one thing: other people continuing to narrate the room around him. No one was doing that anymore. His mother stood near the hall table, with rain still darkening her coat. Leo remained on the stairs, not hiding now, not listening from above, but fully inside the truth Daniel had spent 5 years arranging around him. Martin was still between Daniel and the dining table. I stood at the edge of the papers, the fake letter, the debt notices, the templates, the transfer summaries, and the parcel inquiry, looking at the wreckage of a story that had once felt almost sacred to me. Daniel's voice, when it came, was lower than before. You don't understand what the last 5 years were. No, I said. I understand exactly what they were. He shook his head once. No, you understand paper. You don't understand pressure. That sentence would have worked on me yesterday, maybe even that morning. But by then I had seen too much of his pressure translated into categories, notes, timing scripts, and pre-arranged emotional entries. Martin answered before I could. Pressure is not a defense to misrepresentation. Daniel gave him a flat look. Everything is misrepresentation to you. No, Martin said, only the parts built to survive scrutiny. That silenced him for a beat. Then he looked at me again. What do you want, Claire? The question was wrong in a way that told me he still didn't understand what had broken. He thought this was the part where I named punishment. He still thought the center of the room was him. I looked at Leo. I want a direct structure for him, I said. No more money through you. No more private urgency. No more moral blackmail built around my sister. Daniel laughed once under his breath. You think you can just reroute a life because you found some notes? No, I said. I think I can stop funding yours. That landed. His mother closed her eyes briefly. Leo didn't move. Martin wrote something down. Daniel's face changed then. Not rage exactly, something more exposed than rage. The look of a man who has spent years treating future money as part of the room and is now being forced to imagine a version of tomorrow where it is gone. He turned to his mother. You knew she'd do this. Mrs. Porter looked at him with a kind of exhausted pity I had never seen on her face before. No, she said. I knew she'd finally see you. Silence. Then Leo came the rest of the way down the stairs. No one stopped him. He stood near the dining room doorway, not beside me and not beside Daniel, his own position. That mattered more than anything else in the house. I don't want you telling her things for me anymore, he said. Daniel opened his mouth. Leo cut across him. I don't want you saying school is fine when it isn't. I don't want you saying Mom wanted things when you don't have proof. And I don't want Aunt Claire sending money because you make everything sound like an emergency. There it was. Not a dramatic speech, just the clean removal of permission. Daniel looked at him for a long second and then away. Good. Let him feel that. Let him feel what it meant when the human shield inside the structure stopped cooperating with the script. Martin closed his folder. Here is what happens next. Claire's future support, if any, goes into a protected structure we draft directly. We preserve everything in this room tonight. We send notice in the morning on the parcel inquiry. We review whether any instrument, draft, or representation created legal exposure, And until that is done, Mr. Porter, you do not present yourself as the interpreter of Anna's wishes." Daniel smiled then, but there was nothing warm in it. "And if I disagree?" Martin looked at the table. "Then disagree from outside the documents." That was the answer. Not theatrical, not threatening, just final. I gathered the last of the copied pages and slid them into Martin's envelope. Then I took the fake letter in Anna's voice and placed it on top of the stack. I wanted that piece visible, not because it was legally the most important, because it was morally the worst. 5 years of money mattered. The parcel mattered. The office mattered. The scripts mattered. But the ugliest thing in the room was still the page where Daniel had tried to reconstruct my sister into a cleaner instrument for future use. When I looked back up, he was watching the letter too. Good. Let that be the image he carries. Not my anger, not Martin's authority. That page. Because that page was the point where survival ended and desecration began. And from that moment on, none of us were in a family discussion anymore. We were in cleanup. That word followed me through the rest of the night because it was the first honest one anyone had used in that house. Not closure, not healing, cleanup. The removal of false structure after the damage becomes visible. Martin stayed another hour. He photographed the office, the hidden cabinet, the drawer contents, and the papers we had pulled into the open. Then he made me sign the first preservation log while he wrote chain of possession beside each item. Fake Anna letter, transfer summaries, debt notices, parcel inquiry, templates, the Aunt Claire file, school statements, both real and rewritten. That helped. Not emotionally, structurally. For 5 years, Daniel had kept me moving by making everything feel too painful, too private, or too urgent to slow down and label. The simple act of naming each document in plain language felt like taking ground back. Mrs. Porter left first. She signed a short statement for Martin, kissed Leo on the head, and paused at the front door long enough to say one sentence to me. "I should have told you sooner." "Yes," I said. She nodded once and walked out into the rain. Leo stayed downstairs. He helped me carry the loose papers from the office into the dining room and stood beside me while I checked the pages against Martin's list. "Did he write all of this?" he asked. "Some of it," I said. "Some of it he built from real things." Leo looked at the papers on the table. "That feels worse." He was right. Daniel had taken real school pressure, real bills, real grief, and real sentences Anna actually said, then turned them into something usable. By a little after 10, Martin had what he needed for the night. "I'll draft the support structure tomorrow," he said. "Nothing else goes through Daniel. If he tries urgency, deadlines, or Anna's wishes again, send it to me." I nodded. Then he looked at Leo. "And you need a direct line too, not through your father, through your aunt, your school, and me if necessary." Leo nodded once. Daniel had not spoken for almost 20 minutes by then. He sat at the far end of the room in a dining chair, turned half away from the table, looking less like a man preparing a defense and more like someone trying to understand a world that no longer bent around him. When Martin finally left, the house changed again. Not safer, quieter. Leo stood at the sink drinking water. I was stacking the last preserved copies into my bag when Daniel finally spoke. "So that's it." I looked at him. For tonight, I said. He gave a dry laugh. You always did need the clean ending. No, I said. I needed the truth before another payment. He leaned back in the chair. You think this fixes anything? No, I think it stops one thing. He was quiet for a second. And what happens when the bills still exist tomorrow? There it was. Not apology, not denial, just the blunt remainder once the theater had burned off. The bills are your truth, I said. They were never supposed to become mine by disguise. Leo turned from the sink and looked straight at his father. Mine either. Daniel did not answer him. That silence mattered more than anger would have. For the first time in 5 years, he was no longer speaking for everyone in the room. I picked up my bag and moved toward the hall. Leo followed me to the door. Are you coming back tomorrow? He asked. Yes. Really? Yes. His face changed then, only slightly, but enough. Less guarded, not happy. Not yet. I'm sorry I waited so long to call you, he said. I shook my head. You called at exactly the right time. Then Leo looked back at me and said the truest sentence in that house all night. I thought if I waited any longer, he'd get the money again. That was all this had ever been in its ugliest form. 1 year, then another, until waiting itself became part of the system. Not tonight. Tonight, the money stayed where it belonged, and for the first time since Anna died, so did the truth. I drove home just after midnight with Martin's document envelope on the passenger seat and Leo's last sentence still sitting in the car with me. I thought if I waited any longer, he'd get the money again. That was the whole architecture of it. Not one grand theft, not one dramatic fraud. Repetition. A yearly system built around urgency, guilt, and controlled language. Daniel had not needed one perfect lie. He had only needed a believable one that could survive long enough to be replaced by the next. When I got home, I did not sleep. I spread everything across my dining table exactly the way Martin had logged it and forced myself to look at the night as sequence rather than shock. The fake letter in Anna's voice, the yearly summaries, the school documents, real and rewritten, the notes about me, the parcel inquiry, the debt letters, the templates, the yellow note. Show this first. He had not just taken advantage of my grief, he had curated it. At 7:12 the next morning, Martin called. I'm filing notices now, he said. Direct support structure for Leo, preservation warning on the parcel inquiry, and formal demand for any undisclosed records tied to your transfers. Good. And Claire? Yes? Do not waste time asking whether Daniel ever loved Anna. That question won't help Leo. He was right. Maybe some of Daniel's grief had been real. It no longer mattered. Real pressure had not forced him to create templates, track emotional timing, or reconstruct Anna into paperwork. He chose structure. By noon, the first practical pieces were already shifting. Martin sent me a draft education support structure in Leo's name only. The school confirmed a direct billing pathway once proper authorization was signed. Grandma Porter agreed in writing that she would no longer pass emergency money through Daniel if another account issue appeared. For the first time in 5 years, help had form instead of mood. Daniel texted 3 times before lunch. We need to talk calmly. You're making this bigger than it is. Leo should not be pulled into your anger at me. I forwarded all 3 messages to Martin and did not answer. At 1:34, Leo sent me one of his own. He hasn't gone into the office today. I stared at that sentence for a long moment. Good, I typed back. Keep me updated. Then, after a pause, I added, How are you? His reply came slower. Quiet. That was probably the most honest answer possible. By evening, I was back at the house with school forms, the new direct payment structure, and copies of the notices Martin had sent. Daniel was not there. Mrs. Porter was. Leo sat across from me at the dining room table, where the dark folder had been the night before, reading the first page that explained exactly how tuition and future educational support would be handled from now on. Not by annual guilt. Not by verbal promises. Not by his father's urgency. By record. Leo looked up after reading the first page. So he can't just say there's an emergency anymore? No, I said. Not to me. He nodded once and kept reading. Before I left, I walked past the office door and stopped. It was open now. The hidden cabinet was empty. The desk was too neat. The room no longer looked powerful, just small. A place where paper had been arranged for too long around one man's need to stay ahead of the truth. I stood there for a moment and thought about Anna. Not the fake version Daniel had typed into letters and support plans. The real one. Sharp, impatient with grand language, protective of Leo, and fully capable of despising what had been done in her name. This story did not end with revenge. It ended with removal. Daniel removed from the flow of money, his versions removed from authority, his urgency removed from the center of Leo's life, and me, finally, removed from the role he had built for me, the grieving sister who could be timed, softened, and billed forever. 5 years was a long time to fund a lie, but not long enough for it to survive paper once the right people started reading.